My name is Rachel Whitman. I'm 36 years old, the founder of a nonprofit that helps underserved students get access to STEM education. I don't wear designer heels or roll up to brunch in a Tesla, which is probably why my stepmother Veronica always looked at me like I was an embarrassing charity case. The morning of my father's will reading, I sat alone in the leather-wrapped waiting room of Kravitz and Associates, thumbing through my emails. Across from me, Veronica laughed a little too loudly as she scrolled through her phone, flanked by her two adult children, Zane and Marley, who were already fantasizing about how they'd spend my father's money. "That lake house in Tahoe is mine," Marley cooed, twirling a lock of her platinum hair. "First thing I'm buying is that Harley," Zane chimed in. "I already picked the custom plates. Dad, dollar, gold." Veronica just smiled, all crimson lips and manicured confidence. "Let's get through the formality first, then we'll talk investments." She didn't look at me, not once. But she didn't have to. The last words she said to me, 6 months ago, were, "If your father really wanted you in his life, he'd have acted like it." What she didn't know is that he did, just not in the way she expected. The receptionist appeared with practiced sympathy. "Miss Whitman, Mr. Kravitz is ready for you." I stood, smoothed down my simple black dress, and followed them into the conference room. Veronica strolled in like she owned the place. Her kids looked ready to pop champagne. I just sat quietly, watching, waiting, because I wasn't here to fight over anything. I was here to watch them lose everything, just like my father and I planned. The conference room smelled like wood polish and inherited privilege. At the head of the table sat Mr. Elliot Kravitz, the family attorney my father had worked with for over 3 decades. He gave me a subtle nod, one of the only people in that room who actually knew what was about to happen. Veronica took the chair opposite him, like a queen settling into her throne. She crossed her legs, placed her designer bag on the table, and flashed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's keep this quick," she said, flipping open her calendar app. "I have a meeting with the trust advisor at 4. Zane sprawled into a leather chair beside her, feet already tapping impatiently. Marley was swiping through real estate listings on her phone, pausing to sigh dramatically at 6-bedroom homes in Palo Alto. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Kravitz asked, folding his hands neatly on top of the folder marked Douglas Whitman, Last Will and Testament. "Please do," Veronica replied. "Douglas and I reviewed the documents thoroughly after our wedding. I think you'll find everything is quite clear." Her voice oozed confidence. Arrogance, really. I said nothing. Mr. Kravitz cleared his throat. "First, my condolences on the passing of Mr. Whitman. He was not only a longtime client, but a dear friend." His final wishes were, as always, expressed with great care. "Yes, yes," Veronica interrupted, waving a manicured hand. "We all miss him terribly. Now, let's discuss the estate." She leaned forward, elbows on the table, already envisioning whatever number she expected to hear. Probably a lot more than what she was worth. Mr. Kravitz slowly opened the folder and scanned the first page. "This will is dated 6 years ago," Veronica nodded smugly. "Shortly after our wedding, Douglas wanted everything aligned to reflect our new family structure, naturally." Marley gave me a sideways glance, a smirk curling at the edge of her mouth. "Sorry, Rachel," she murmured. "Guess Dad didn't leave room for nonprofits in the portfolio." Zane chuckled, tossing a grape from the fruit tray into his mouth. "Should have picked a real job." Mr. Kravitz didn't flinch. "Well then, according to this document, the estate is to be divided between Mrs. Veronica Whitman and her children, Zane and Marley, with a small charitable donation earmarked for education initiatives." He paused. Veronica couldn't help herself. "And Rachel?" He looked up, calm as a lake in winter. "To Rachel Whitman, nothing." Veronica practically beamed. "That's correct." Douglas finally saw reason. After years of disrespect and distance, he understood who truly cared for him. My jaw didn't tighten, my eyes didn't flinch. I simply folded my hands. Because this? This was exactly what we wanted her to say out loud. There was a beat of silence in the room, one of those stretched moments where arrogance hangs so heavy you can almost hear it breathing. Then Mr. Kravitz laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not the throat-clearing kind professionals use to reset tension. No, this was a full-bodied, shoulder-shaking laugh that echoed off the paneled walls, like thunder in a cathedral. Veronica's smile flickered. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "Is there something amusing?" "I apologize," Mr. Kravitz said, dabbing the corners of his eyes with a handkerchief. "That was unprofessional. It's just, Veronica, do you know what a revocable living trust is?" Her eyes narrowed. "Of course I do. It's a financial instrument, a flexible estate tool." "Very good," he nodded, still suppressing a grin. "And do you know when Mr. Whitman established one?" "He didn't," Veronica said quickly. "We updated everything after the wedding. This will reflect his final wishes." Mr. Kravitz pulled out a second, much thicker folder. "This is the Whitman Legacy Trust, established 12 years ago, with amendments over time. The last one was executed 14 months ago." Marley blinked. "Wait, what?" Zane sat up straighter. "Hold on." "What do you mean, trust?" Mr. Kravitz's voice turned crisp. "I mean that the bulk of Mr. Whitman's assets, his homes, investment accounts, vehicles, and liquid funds, were quietly transferred into this trust long before he passed." Veronica's expression cracked. "No, that's not possible. We reviewed all the accounts together." "Indeed you did," Mr. Kravitz replied. "But those were his secondary accounts. The primary ones have belonged to the trust since the day Rachel turned 35. I glanced up. "That was 14 months ago." "Yes," Mr. Kravitz smiled. "Right before the Tahoe trip, I believe, when Mr. Whitman spent the weekend in my office, finalizing the details while you were at the Napa Spa Resort." Zane's voice was suddenly sharp. "So wait, what's in the trust?" "Everything," Kravitz said simply. "The homes, the cars, the stocks, the offshore account, the family art collection, all legally assigned to Rachel Whitman as of last year." Marley's face drained of color. "But we've been living in those houses, driving those cars." "Correct," he said. "For the last 14 months, you've been living on property and using assets you don't legally own. Rachel's been very generous." I finally spoke. "Dad asked me to wait, to observe, to see if maybe you'd change. He wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt." Veronica stood up, her voice trembling with fury. "This is fraud." "No," Mr. Kravitz said, sliding a notarized ledger across the table. "This is estate planning." And then he smiled again, wider this time, because we had only just begun. Veronica sat down slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the table like the world had tilted beneath her. Marley was the first to crack. "This can't be real," she muttered. "We hosted events in that house. I redecorated the sunroom." Mr. Kravitz gave a diplomatic nod. "Yes, on property legally owned by the Whitman Legacy Trust, funds withdrawn from trust-linked accounts, which, as of the final amendment, named Rachel Whitman as the sole beneficiary." Zane stood up, pacing. "That's impossible. I've used Dad's American Express. I've paid bills. We've flown first class, booked with his points." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. Those weren't his points. They were mine. The trust assigned all rewards to me when it transferred. "But why wouldn't he tell us?" Marley asked, her voice cracking. "Why would he let us live like everything was normal?" "Because he hoped," I said softly, "that something might change." Mr. Kravitz stepped in, flipping through a folder. "Mr. Whitman didn't make these decisions lightly. 2 years ago, after a medication error nearly sent him to the ER, he hired a private investigator. What that investigator uncovered was extensive. He laid out photographs, dates, credit card statements, notes. Zane, he said, pointing to one document, took out 3 credit cards under Douglas's name, racked up over $60,000 in debt." Zane went pale. "Marley," he continued, "purchased over $80,000 in jewelry in a 4-month period. Most items were sold secondhand online. Marley gasped. And Veronica, he said, his tone finally cooling. Repeatedly blocked phone calls and visits from Mr. Whitman's friends and his own brother, not to mention the unauthorized changes to his medications and the quiet move of your mother into the guest house without informing him. You can't prove any of that, Veronica hissed. You're right, I said calmly. I don't have to. Dad already did. She froze. Mr. Kravitz reached for another file. Signed statements, surveillance logs, a notarized journal entry from Mr. Whitman himself. Marley looked like she might faint. Zane backed toward the door, jaw tight. Veronica just stared at me, her voice barely audible. You set this up? No, I said. Dad did. I just didn't stop him. Mr. Kravitz closed the folder with finality. And now, it's time we read the letter. Mr. Kravitz slid a cream-colored envelope across the table toward me. My name was written in my father's handwriting, deliberate, steady, unmistakably his. He asked that you read this aloud, Mr. Kravitz said quietly. I nodded and took a slow breath. My hands didn't shake. I unfolded the letter, inhaled the faint scent of cedar that always lingered around my father's study, and began to read. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then everything went exactly as we hoped. First, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the months I spent pretending to push you away, for letting Veronica believe she had won. You and I both knew something was wrong. I just needed time and space to prove it. When I remarried so quickly after your mother passed, you were right to be cautious. But I was tired, Rachel. Tired and lonely, and facing something I hadn't told anyone yet. I'd been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. I thought maybe, just maybe, Veronica would be a comfort in my final years. I was wrong. She isolated me, manipulated my medications. I watched her poison my friendships, my family ties, even my own clarity. But you never gave up. You called, you visited, you sat with me in silence when my head wasn't clear. You never once asked for money. You just wanted me to be your dad again. Asterisk. So I fought back the only way I could. With time, with paperwork, and with a plan. You remember that long. You remember that long weekend in Tahoe? While Veronica was off at that spa retreat, you and I spent 2 days signing documents in Mr. Kravitz's office. You thought it was just estate housekeeping. But it was more than that. It was the beginning of this trust. The real legacy. Yours. Thank you for pretending to be distant. Thank you for letting them believe they had outmaneuvered you. I know it wasn't easy watching them take over the house, the cars, the life I built, but it allowed the truth to surface on its own, without confrontation, without chaos. That was always your strength. Patience, Veronica, Zane, Marley. If you're hearing this too, then you know by now I saw you. All of you. The spending, the lies, the manipulation. The investigators' reports have already been filed with the district attorney, who assured me they'd be reviewed once I passed. I imagine you have about 30 days left to pack up and reflect. Rachel, I leave you everything not because you asked for it, but because you earned it. With grace. With silence. With loyalty. You were the only one who never wanted a piece of me. Just my presence. Oh, and one last thing. Your mother's engagement ring is in the second drawer of my old desk. I've kept it hidden since the day Veronica started eyeing it like a hawk. It's yours now, as she always intended. Take care of yourself, my girl. Take care of the legacy. And don't ever doubt that you were my best decision in this life. All my love, Dad. By the time I looked up, Veronica was rigid in her chair, her face drained of color. Zane had gone silent. His phone clenched in his hand. Marley's mascara ran in streaks down her cheeks. There were no more smirks. No more lake house dreams or designer furniture fantasies. Just the sound of truth settling like dust in a room full of liars. Mr. Kravitz waited a beat, letting the silence settle like a curtain falling on a failed performance. Then, in his calm, composed voice, he added, "There's one final matter." He opened a sleek black folder and pulled out 3 crisp documents, sliding one to each of them: Veronica, Zane, and Marley. "Eviction notices," he said plainly. "Effective immediately. You have 30 days to vacate all properties owned by the Whitman Legacy Trust." Veronica's chair scraped violently against the floor as she stood. "You can't evict me." I was his wife. I didn't rise. I simply looked her in the eye. "You're a tenant, a guest, one who's overstayed her welcome." "Unbelievable," Marley muttered, blinking through streaks of ruined makeup. "He left us with nothing?" "No," I corrected. "He left you with what you deserved. He just gave me what I earned." Zane slammed a fist on the table. "This is a setup. We'll sue." Mr. Kravitz's tone never wavered. "You're welcome to try. But be aware that contesting the will or the trust activates the secondary clause, which authorizes full release of the investigator's report, photos, audio, documentation, to the district attorney's office and the media." That shut him up. Then Mr. Kravitz pulled out one last envelope, and this was filed this morning on Ms. Whitman's behalf. He handed it to Veronica. "A no-contact order. From this point forward, you are legally barred from initiating any communication with Rachel Whitman, including through third parties." Veronica's mouth opened and closed. "You planned this," she whispered, her voice small. "You and Douglas. You did this to humiliate us." I finally stood. "No, he did this to protect me and to give you one last chance to do the right thing." I looked at them one last time. 3 people who had built their future on a lie, and now couldn't figure out why the foundation had crumbled. "Enjoy your 30 days, I said quietly, gathering my things. As I turned toward the door, Veronica's voice broke again. "Rachel, wait." I paused but didn't look back. I was his wife. Doesn't that count for something? I turned my head just enough to answer. "It counts for exactly what you put into the marriage: lies, manipulation, and greed. Dad figured out your value, Veronica." I smiled, not cruelly, just with clarity. $1, and honestly, I thought he was being generous. Outside, the wind had picked up, sharp for a California afternoon, crisp in that way that feels like autumn biting through silk. I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, breathing it in. The folder in my hands wasn't heavy, but the weight of everything it represented pressed against my chest. Not the money, not the houses or the art or the offshore accounts. The truth. The truth that I hadn't imagined it. That my father had never stopped loving me. That everything I'd quietly endured, the dismissive glances, the family photos I wasn't invited to, the rumors Veronica spread about me abandoning him, had all been worth it. I got in my car. My car, officially and legally mine, no longer under the trust's name, but under my own. And I drove. The cemetery was quiet when I arrived, just a whisper of wind and the low hum of insects. My father's headstone was freshly cleaned, thanks to me, and surrounded by orange coral roses from the garden I'd kept alive for him behind the bungalow he secretly bought in my name. I knelt, tracing the engraving with 2 fingers. "We did it, Dad," I whispered, "just like you planned." For a moment, I thought I could hear him laugh. That low, warm chuckle I missed more than I ever let anyone know. The same one he'd made when we sat together 14 months ago in Kravitz's office, signing pages and pages of trust documents while Veronica drank wine at a resort, thinking she'd won. "She thinks she's clever," he'd told me then, eyes gleaming with that rare, mischievous light. "But clever and smart aren't the same thing. You, my girl, you're smart." I closed my eyes, breathing in the roses, the earth, the closure. And then I stood, dusted off my knees, and walked back to my car. I wasn't going back to the estate, let them pack. I was going home, the one he gave me, before the world ever realized I already had everything I needed. The little house on Moraga Lane sat at the top of a quiet hill, wrapped in ivy and morning light. My father bought it in secret 2 years ago, under my name. No questions asked. He called it Plan B in his emails, as if he already knew Plan A would collapse under the weight of greed. I had moved in without fanfare. Let the world believe I was struggling, scraping by in my nonprofit role, while Veronica's family draped themselves in cashmere and walked marble floors they never earned. I waited, I watched, and I listened. Now, for the first time in years, I stepped through the front door and didn't feel like I was hiding. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was revelation. My father didn't just leave me money, he left me his mind, his faith, and his ability to think 12 steps ahead. He knew how to test people's character without ever raising his voice. I used to think that made him cold. Now, I realize it made him wise. I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer he'd mentioned in his letter. Second on the left. There it was. My mother's engagement ring, simple, emerald cut, still radiant. I held it for a moment before slipping it on. Not because I needed a symbol, but because I wanted to remember her and him, and the way they both believed I was worth more than what the world saw. Outside, the wind stirred again. I looked out the window toward the hills and smiled. Veronica thought she'd inherited a fortune, but what I inherited was far greater. Legacy, clarity, and freedom. They never saw it coming. Because clever people rarely do.